starting now. And okay, so welcome everybody. This is Kubernetes SIG API Machinery open source bi-weekly meeting. Today is January 24th. 2024 is not a pun intended. And we have a nice agenda today, a couple of different topics, some more operational, some more about development and features. So why don't we get started? And I will give the microphone to Jyoti for the first one.
Hi, thank you. So I'm here to speak about a few observations I have. I work in the capacity of a cluster operator of many clusters, and the clusters are mostly set up in HA mode, highly available when we define, and when we say highly available mode in Kubernetes API server, they mean in different setups, making sure that the nodes which are running the processes of API server are in different failure domains. And failure domains in many different places are called in different terms. I work in AWS, so the failure domain here I'll be referring to as availability zone. And every cloud, every on-prem provider, they have their own terms for what a failure domain is. The reason API server is placed in different failure domains is, let's say one rack falls off, catches fire, or a building catches fire in this case. The other API server is still there. It could become degraded. It could reject certain number of requests because of 429s, but still keeps chugging. Some traffic keeps going on. Now, with that said, had a few, I interact with customers as well from time to time, and I had a observation that during certain use cases, the HA mode is great for API server because it's serving live traffic. But if we place any other process on the same nodes, which are leader elected, in this case, Kube Controller Manager, Cloud Controller Manager, and many other private operators even, they are not really, the node is HA, but these operators don't have the resiliency to understand HA. And it is as good as whatever the node gives it. In a degraded situation, if the node where the leader election or leader elected component is running, if it fails and the health check of the component fails, it's easy. It can fail over to another node. But these racks, these failure domains, they don't fail as clearly. And sometimes they may have a network interface which is flapping. And this happens because failure domains, I mean, at least in the place I work, the other teams which deploy software to failure domains, they deploy it in phases. They deploy to one failure domain in one time. If something bad happens, it gets detected immediately, rolled back. They don't deploy to all failure domains. That makes it more easy to detect when something is happening specifically in one failure domain. But when that failure domain is where the leader elected thing is there, and it is not failing health checks because it's so partial, clusters could get into a more degraded state. Now comes the next part where I'm the cluster operator, and I'm, let's say, operating hundreds, maybe thousands of clusters. And I know for a fact that a failure domain is impacted, maybe from my observability stack, maybe from the same people who are deploying and tell me that something bad is happening in AZ. If you could, please move out. And while we try to roll back stuff. And the rollback could take an hour, 2 hours. I don't have the control. I observed that, and it causes problems to customers because, let's say, CCM in this case gets impacted. New nodes cannot join because CCM, in the example I provided in a chaos testing example, CCM is not able to make network connection. Irrespective of how well we define the health check here, the health checks will be as good as like the operator writing it or the code being written. Let's say CCM has a check that if X number of internet requests fail, then fail health check, right? I mean, those are very nuanced health checks, very hard to get it right. And they will span many controllers that as an operator, I don't have control on. So what I did in this case is I did a patch and ran it in the API server. The patch is so bad, we will come to that later. But when I say bad, it's not bad, but it's that it's a hacky patch. So I ran into the API server in a chaos testing environment, and I see it work. So let's say I'm operating some hundreds of clusters in this region, and in this case, the controllers need to know the need to have the ability to understand which failure domain they are in. I mean, without that, we can't take action. So it's a signaling mechanism. I created a signaling mechanism, and that was embedded into API server and the controllers. And they could know that a zone has a problem, and they relinquish their lease. So the last time I spoke about this, maybe a year and a half back, there was a call that get us more data. And the reason I'm speaking is not to say it's the best way, but I'm saying I have some more data where it worked perfectly. So then I would move on to the next piece where how do we do that? And I have a small sample client Go based thing. It's not the best one, but it also works. I've verified. But it brings me to the part where Joe is working on a CAP to make a rule-based um, system where leadership, who takes the leadership can be determined by an operator in a place which is not in client Go. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks for summarizing this. This is loosely related. I don't. It's interesting that this CAP was focused on trying to give more control over controllers during upgrades when the controller is not identical, and being able to like pick which version of a controller you want to run. One of the things that was proposed in it was that, you know, if the controller that is coordinating the election of other controllers wants to preempt the current leader, that it would have a way to do that by putting like a marker on a lease. I had mentioned that, like, hey, if you really got in a bind and you wanted to manually stop one of these things from being a leader, you could go manually poke that lease if this feature existed, which is kind of like a manual mitigation. I'm not sure how I feel about that being used as like part of an automated workflow.
You'd be able to stop it, Joe. But I guess I would say I'm sympathetic to someone says, well, I don't control the code. How can I get the health check right? On the other hand, this seems like a pretty clear case of component can't do its job. Therefore, component should release itself. And the simplest way to do that is with a health check. And so I would strongly encourage making health checks work.
Yeah, I have one note on that. So let's say I wanted to even make this when controllers crash, they don't have ability to know what was happening in the previous run. And when they relinquish the lease based on the lease timelines, they have the ability to start immediately. So today, they relinquish the lease and start off immediately, like ACM, CCM, and they start afresh and they have to make all these calls again and fail again to realize, oh, I don't have a memory, so I must be seeing this earlier. And every time they crash, that's when kubelet comes in with the crash loop back off, which is hardcoded to 5 minutes today. We could change that. And that leads to the failover. The health Z just failing was not sufficient. There's an observation. Maybe we could
like
create
you
more.
get to choose what key you use, right? So host name is a good default, but there are choices for what do I want my lease key to be.
Okay.
I think I'm hearing a couple of things here that go beyond the usual conception of health checks. One is that the determination is being made not by one controller, but even by an external system, right? And also mentioned that it's not one controller, but it's a bunch of controllers. It's a bunch of clusters, right? So there's really a level of integration of and decision making that's far beyond the scope that you would expect a single controller to do. That doesn't mean that you can't reflect that through health checks. Perhaps, I mean, if you want to do this in a purely additive way, could you make your controller in its health checking code somehow subscribe or be sensitive to this larger decision making?
Right.
The downside of that occurs to me is if the whole problem is degraded operation, maybe that sensitivity degrades and this mechanism doesn't work.
If there's an external system, that external system can just delete the pods.
So in this case, so this particular case is about static pods, so we can't delete it. I cannot delete it, but in other places, yes, deleting a pod could be a use case. But the point is, I don't want to make as less operation during these times because I don't know what's happening. I'm still debugging, and I want to really go and delete a pod in this case, depending on how many clusters one is operating. Yeah. So I see some benefit, especially for someone who's operating a number of clusters, and you have to delete a pod, then you have to go to cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a company operating 100 clusters, 200 clusters is not uncommon, right? So yes, one could do that, but how do we do that with one shot and not going to 10 controllers across 100 clusters and doing this?
Well, I think even the KEP that Joe has proposed, you would still be going to every single cluster, to every single lease, modifying every lease after you identified which leases belong to which pods. So I would, I mean, I would hesitate to say that you're pitching it. We have nothing that we would say works over these over multiple clusters, except coding your health check to reflect, can I progress?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm saying this is an observation, and if more people like it, we could make a case for it, and hence I am. And we don't have to marry it with this KEP. I could work on a separate thing, but if it's not useful for a larger population, of course we won't do it. So I just wanted to describe the use case. Okay, that will be it. If there are other questions, I could take it about observations, but otherwise.
So knowing that you couldn't control what it was used for, Joe, I still don't see a reason to not. Like, I don't see it as we can't do this because someone could use it for that. But
yeah, it doesn't seem harmful to keep the feature in that KEP, right? And if somebody decides they want to go poke a lease, like I don't see any particular problem with that. I would also love to see areas where we're seeing like gaps in health check quality from any cloud provider, Google, AWS, anybody, like going upstream and getting those things improved.
Yeah, I tried that. Maybe I'm not articulating right. So if the part there where controller crashes and restarts, we really have to, in each component, you have to put a marker or some sort so that the controller puts a marker that yes, something was wrong with me. So don't start me again, give me some more time and somebody else start. Yeah, we could do that, of course.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in proposals on like, hey, we tried this and it actually ends up like detecting the problem that we have. We might get into Mike's point that like some of these things are just really, really hard to measure from the process doing it, but
exactly, yes. Yep, that's the trouble I have right now. So
I
for
am,
example, what fails is a question. So CCM makes a ton of calls, calls to instances, calls to VPC, calls like many places. One of them could be failing because of this trouble. Now, how do you measure exactly what is the vector of failure for the controller to automatically take action? I haven't figured that out yet, but that could be a challenge.
another thing to be sure that you're using properly is graceful release, that you are gracefully releasing your lease, because when you get terminated, you should gracefully release the lease, which means that the next component the next potential pod will pick it up. So like I've cycled back and just grabbed it again is indicative of I'm not using graceful release. So that's another area to just improve in.
Yeah, I have some observation around that. So what happens even if the graceful release is done, the next cycle when the release is tried on the next controller and the time this guy tries to come back up is of race condition. So yes, it works. Sometimes there are times when it's just racy.
Since you know those times, you're actually able to decide to not end your process until you have waited that long, right? So you can release, you can wait. Graceful termination will wait for you to terminate. But if you wait long enough for the next one to pick up, it becomes deterministic if you have another one available. Like this is OpenShift does stuff like this to be sure that we have low latency in standard cases.
Yeah. That's one possibility for sure. Okay. Any other? Mike, you still have a hand raised. If you have something I could answer, otherwise.
Yeah, I was just realized. I'm still a little confused. I haven't had time to study this beforehand. I'm sorry. But it sounds like I'm hearing a concern from you, like still about the ability for a controller to detect. So are you saying that this scenario here is where a human makes the determination that things should be released?
Just can you repeat the last statement? Who makes the determination?
Yeah, I'm asking, is the scenario you're interested in here where a human makes a determination that this AZ is degraded and they want the
Yes.
controllers? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, because these are so when these things happen, they are not deterministic. If
Okay.
out of 5 API calls, 2 may fail,
Mhm.
the rest of them succeed. But I know for a fact from the rest of my system that something is wrong. Maybe I created a support ticket
Okay.
with the
Okay.
rack order that then they're telling me way out if you can. And
Okay.
that cannot be solved by health checks, at least in my observations.
Well, pursuing my other idea, I just realized there's a solution to the sensitivity failure problem, right? You can make it fail safe or fail unhealthy, right? So if you had some human maintained central indication of health of each AZ, right? You could code your health check to
Right.
test that and fail itself if it doesn't get a positive answer.
Correct. And that's the solution which I would be doing instead of maintaining a patch. But the reason I spoke was I see something which could be beneficial not to do in 10 controllers to subscribe to the same place. It would be a more general approach if we did something in the leasing mechanism. But the other mechanisms that I described surely work. I don't disagree. I'm just looking for, could we have a more determined approach?
Thank you.
Okay, that was my time. Thank you very much.
If you had the coordinated leader election, you would still have to go to every cluster.
Yes, but not, that's the vector. We won't have to go to.
Would you have enough information to identify the ones you wanted?
Possibly, I have to talk to Joe about his vision for the coordinated one and whether can we create something which is central to the cluster and then a hierarchy of all controllers that they look at.
Yeah, the proposal I had was literally just take the existing leases that we use for leader election today and just have a way to put a value in a field on those. So it would literally just be an API resource that you write a value to a field, and it would be per controller.
Okay, I assume that there was a proposal to create a new object, and that could also do it. So, and hence I was thinking.
I wasn't planning on changing the object we used for leader election. That was going to change the same. There is additional information we need about the candidates that can be leader elected.
Yeah,
but that doesn't. I don't really think that's central to this discussion.
that's it. Okay, I could like learn from you more and maybe pitch that this happens, but otherwise, yeah, that was the observations.
All right, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Hope you get what you needed and take some notes. Let's go to the next topic in the agenda. Philippe, are you here?
Yeah, can I share the screen?
You can, but it doesn't allow you, right? So let me see how I can.
No.
Make co-host should put you make co-host. Okay, can you find out?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to introduce a CAP that we are working on, which is called declarative non-maintenance. And this CAP spans multiple SIGs. So I would like to ask opinion on this and also discuss the API of that a bit. So I will try to go through that quickly. First, I would like to recapitulate the current state of the non-maintenance in Kubernetes. This is modeled on the kubectl drain, although there are other ways to do the non-maintenance, but this is the Kubernetes one. So when you just call kubectl drain on the node, we mark the node as unschedulable, and then we get all the pods. We filter the pods according to the kubectl drain filters, which can be customized through the kubectl flags. But by default, we are filtering daemon set pods, mirror pods, etc. And then we try to call eviction on every pod until all of the pods are evicted. And then we have the node drained, and we can do, for example, a shutdown or software updates or etc. This can be also overridden, and it can be just the pods can be just deleted without using the eviction API. So I would like to say the cases we are targeting with this CAP. So as you can see with this approach, this is a top-down approach where you basically tell all of the pods to go away without any considerations. So if you have, for example, a single replica application, then this will cause the downtime for the application. So the application is evicted, and then it needs to be started on another node. This is also problematic for pods managed by the horizontal pod autoscaler, which when it's in one replica is the same problem. And it's also problematic for applications which need to do some kind of migration. For example, they need to migrate the data from the node or the state of the application, or maybe they just want to finish some work before it's done. So the eviction doesn't give much space to this. So for example, if you have the one replica application, it can specify a PDB. But this PDB, if you make the PDB strict, this PDB will cause a headache to the admin. So the admin, when the admin tries to run the drain will basically stop because the PDB will block it. There are other ways how to block the eviction, also through the validation and admission. And so we are trying to solve these cases. So I will move to the API, which is suggested. So we basically have a new object which is called non-maintenance, and we are trying to do everything declaratively. So it's not imperative as today with the kubectl drain, and basically we can operate on multiple nodes, a set of nodes which are set by the node selector, and there are a couple of phases for cordon and drain, and we also can specify a reason, and we have a status. So I will go through the flow how it would look like. And so the same flow, we will try to be backwards compatible as much as we can. So when we detect a possibility that the cluster supports a node maintenance, we create the node maintenance object with which is set for cordon and drain. Then this is observed by the node maintenance controller, which is a new controller we would like to add. And this just looks at the node selector and will basically set the unschedulable fields to all of the nodes. So this allows admins to operate on the set of nodes and then do not have to do it for each of these. So the kubectl drain will wait for this. So it sees the nodes are unschedulable. And then the node maintenance controller will look at the pods which are on these nodes. And we are proposing to add a new condition on the pod, which is called evacuation request. So we will try to be compatible. So we will ignore the daemon set pods and also the mirror pods, but this is a detail. So we will add a condition evacuation request, and then we expect a controller which wants to support evacuation, which is, for example, it could be a deployment controller or any other controller, and it has to accept the evacuation request. So it will decide which pods support evacuation, and it will also set evacuation initiated condition on the pod. So this is a way for kubectl also to recognize which pods are supported by this new flow and which ones are not. So it can wait for some time before to see if the evacuation was initiated or accepted. And then the rest of the work is basic for these pods which were accepted. The rest of the work is on the controller. So in for example, in the deployment, when you have, for example, max search, this gives you an ability to create another pod on another node. And once this pod becomes ready or available, we can delete the pod which was requested for evacuation. So this can be tailored to each use case, and it can migrate the data or some other things, but it can be used also for the basic workloads we have in Kubernetes today. And kubectl drain will first wait for this evacuation request condition, evacuation initiated. And for the rest of the pods which do not have fulfilled this contract, we will do the same flow as before. So we will get the pods and run them through the drain filters, and then evict or delete them as before. So yeah, I would like to first discuss if this makes sense to people, this cap, and if there are any questions.
I'll definitely put it on my list to go through. Sorry, David, did you have a question there?
Well, I can go second.
Okay, I'll go for it.
I was just going to ask whether there was anything specific you needed from API Machinery, or this looks tightly coupled to probably Node and it's classified as apps.
Yes. So yeah, I have already introduced this cap to the SIG node, and they were okay with that. This cap to pursue it further. So my main question is regarding the API. So the basic problem we are facing here is this new API on pod, which is just 2 new conditions. So we basically need a way for to tell some pod that it should be evacuated, and then we need to, so this is the request, and then we need to know that it was accepted by the controller. And there is also a third requirement that could be done, which is to say that the evacuation is progressing. So if you have a controller which is managing the evacuation and the controller crashes, it might stop the evacuation and it would basically block the drain. So my main question is if this API seems okay to you, or if we should try to introduce some new API to the pods, or if or some kind of, for example, there is an option if you would have a health check on the pod, if like the evacuation check, which the pod would report if it is migrating correctly. But this would need to be supported by the pod, and it could not be done by the outside controller.
So there's two groups that do APIs in the project, and this, I apologize, this is sometimes confusing. There's API Machinery, and then there's API Review. So API Review will review and approve API changes based on conventions and guidance and things like that. API Machinery, we focus more on the infrastructure that makes APIs possible. So I am happy to look at this and think about it, but we are going to also need to take this to API Review, which is a different group.
Okay, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, I can also ask there.
Yeah, and there's a couple ways you can do that. There is a label to mark a PR for API Review when it's ready. You can also, there is, I think, a bi-weekly meeting for that group if you just want to go and get advice on a particular thing. They also have a Slack channel if you have a specific question to ask. I sometimes find it's really helpful, especially if I know something's going to be contentious on an API. I'll usually go and just directly talk to people first about that, and then by the time I get to the API review, we're hopefully down to just details.
Yeah, I think there might be one part, if I understand it correctly, for the SIG API Machinery. So, I guess this could be solved by having a way of identifying a controller of a certain object. We have, for example, we have the owner references, but these ones are used only to identify the object which is owning. So for deployments, it's the pod. But if we could have a way of identifying the controller of a deployment and identifying the health of the controller in the API somehow.
What would you do if it was unhealthy?
We could say that the evacuation is not progressing, so, and we could react to that. So in case of the deployment controller, it could be just references to a set of pods which are running the kube controller manager. But I guess this is not always possible, even if you have an external controller. But it could be useful in some cases, I suppose.
I have to think about that. Usually I think about controllers just you kind of expect them to do work, and if they don't do work, then you could kind of observe that. I'm actually observing the controller's health directly. I'll think about it. I don't know if I have any other thoughts on that right now.
It is worth pointing out that it's a mistake to believe that an object has a single controller managing it. There are multiple cases where a single instance of a resource is actually managed by multiple operators, multiple controllers, where you have something auto-applying what a deployment looks like, and then you have the deployment controller itself operating on the deployment, and then you have an HPA scaling the deployment. And the concept of a controller is one that was attempted to be added. It actually was added. There's a field for it, but it was flawed, and it never actually gives proper data, or rarely gives proper data. One particular note about this API. Before it goes up for API review, I would say that Node is the biggest consumer and producer of the pod API. So them being satisfied with the API first is really critical to have ready. That's not a statement one way or another about whether this is workable or not, just that Node has to agree, yes, this is a good change for pods.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, for sure. I will take it back to Signode to ask them. Back to the controllers. Yeah, I suppose like even if you have like multiple controllers, you could describe this in the API somehow. I'm not saying like we should do it. I'm just saying that if there was some other requests for this feature, like it could be used like this. So, for example, there is there is a cap for jobs, which we are adding the annotation which managed by, which we are also trying to say which other which controller manages the job. So yeah, this is just a request if this could be done someday. Okay, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, and if there are no other remarks, I can give the floor to someone else.
Thank you. Can you stop sharing? Okay. Thank you, Philip. Let's go back to the agenda. I think it's this screen. Very good. What about the next topic? Nilek, Mo?
Yeah. So this is regarding the work that I was doing in 129 and continuing in 130 about moving SVM entry. So a couple of things. Like first of all, I have like the basic code in place where we can do the storage migration now from the garbage collectors cache. But the couple of questions that came up, and I just wanted to check with everybody and how we can move forward with those. So first thing is like we decided that the schema of the CRD APIs. I mean, we would keep the schema same for the built-in APIs as what we have in the CRD APIs, right? But just wanted to check, like, is it okay if we add an additional field, like, of course, by retaining the old schema, but just an additional field, particularly in the status of the SVM resource? So the reason for that is what we're trying to do is we are trying to sort of make use of the status in order to, for example, compare the resource version of when we start the migration to the actual garbage collectors resource version in order to compare whether the GC cache is updated or not and things like that. So that's one use. Second thing we are thinking is like, we can actually track the state of the migration. So let's say if you're trying to migrate 10 resources and we like process the list to up to 5 resources, then and if the controller crashes, then we can maintain the some sort of a state in the status so that when the next time controller starts, it can pick up from where it left off and things like that. So what do you guys think? Like, is it okay if we add an additional field in the status for these purposes?
This was the continue.
Yes, I mean, one of the use cases sort of if I mean, I'm trying to say if we can continue from where we left off. That is one of the use cases.
So I would expect the easiest path to be to move what we have and then evolve from there. I wouldn't say it's impossible to create a new API, but I would expect the easiest path to be able to evolve from that. Like, it's not frozen, but it also move what we have is very easy to reason about, and make something new is notably more difficult.
When you say move, or like, is it, are you talking about the schema or are you talking about the implementation also? I mean, I'm kind of confused in that.
Yeah, as a starting point, both, right? I mean, like that would be a very easy way to get started. Like, here's my old CRD, here is my old, yeah, I've changed the name because I can't have cohabiting CRDs. And then here's the implementation, and evolve from there. It would seem to be very easy to review. Creating a new implementation seems significantly harder, but could also be done. You want to create like a net new implementation and a new type to back it?
I mean, one thing that we earlier discussed was, I mean, in terms of implementation specifically, I'm talking is we don't want to use the simple list that the current SVM is using. So we decided to use the garbage collector cache, right? So that is where we're differing from the implementation wise. And the additional field that I'm talking about in statuses is specifically to go with that approach.
I mean, it certainly can be changed. Do you have a PR? I noticed there wasn't a link.
Yeah, I mean, I have a code in my branch, but I haven't opened a PR yet. But I can open a work in progress PR and just sort of you can have a look at it. I can do it today.
So stepping back just for a second, like I think maybe before we even talk about the schema stuff, so that last link there, that one is the discussion link to one of the PRs where David, you had written out sort of like a plan for how we could build out and progress this feature. As far as I can tell, the SVM stuff in the external repo has no leader election. So I don't know how we can build the thing that you were asking for.
That's fair. Can we go ahead and just add leader election to it? I did notice you had a PR that was linked. I didn't, and I believe it's from a Red Hatter, but I hadn't looked to see why it didn't merge.
I mean, yeah, so I mean, that's there. I guess I would ask Lewis to go finish the PR, please, if he's available.
Seems like a reasonable request.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to progress with the whole like I'm going to coordinate on this external lease when the external lease doesn't exist.
I agree, Mo. But I don't see a blocker to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I was trying to rationalize how this would work. Like, if I need to go update the external project, am I kind of hosed already? Isn't the point to?
No, it still gives a path. So right now, like if you're using this, you have API consumers, they're producing the old thing, that works just fine. There's a component running that actually manages it and uses it. And then can I have a controlled switch from A to B?
Okay. Sure. I guess in my head it was more like I wouldn't need to touch the old stuff to make the new stuff work, but sure, I guess if you're willing to touch both things at the same time to coordinate them, it's okay.
They don't have to be at the same time, right? Like,
Oh, sure. That at some point in the future, I suppose, is what I mean. But okay, so that can be done. So we could do it that way. But yeah, so in that vein, the question about the schema stuff was, as long as the existing fields in the existing CRD are retained and their meaning is unchanged, and basically nothing about the existing ones is unchanged, adding new fields shouldn't break the old controller in any way, right?
that's probably true. As long as it's either A or B running, yes, I think that's true.
Right.
Is that what the first question was?
Say what?
Okay, I couldn't figure out the first question because we're always willing to evolve an API. So okay, that's what the first question is about.
Right. The first question is about basically Nilak and I skipped the part where we try to copy paste the thing that's outside in, and instead went straight to the I would like my new
Bold.
fancy.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe that was a bad idea, but that's the approach we took. So it needs, I mean, it doesn't necessarily explicitly need them, but if you wanted to actually make sense and do like a good job, it needs some fields to like do some bookkeeping.
I hear you. Would spec remain the same, right? Because for consumers, that is very convenient. Right.
I don't
Yeah.
think you're
Okay.
planning any touches to spec. We just need some places to hold some data. So yeah.
Okay, put into context, that makes sense why I couldn't figure out why the question was being asked. Yeah, and that would just be new fields on the new. No, it'd be on both. Yeah.
Yeah,
it'd be on both. Okay.
yeah, I guess it has to be on both because the new controller might be acting on the old
Correct.
resource.
But I think that would be practical as well,
Okay.
and that would protect consumers. So yeah.
Okay, so that would mean that we would have to update the CRD as well in the other repo, which is fine. Okay. So David, can you convince Lewis to finish his PR?
I have already sent him a message, and he has not yet answered.
Okay, so that would be great. And then from I might ask you, David, to review that PR again to make sure that we're happy with whatever lease is going to be used, because we're going to end up taking a dependency entry on that same lease.
Yep,
And
that's fair.
unneeded.
Yeah, we'll take the dependency on it, and we will wish that we had the coordinated lease so that we can move in one direction.
Okay. Thank you, Nilek. I don't know what to do about the last two because they had to drop. He said he put in the chat that he added more information to discuss this, but I don't know if, given that we have only 10 minutes, we want to keep this. David, Joe, what do you think? Have some discussion about this or leave it to the next meeting?
If something is breaking server-side apply, then cherry picking to a supported release sounds reasonable to me. Would you agree, Joe?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. So that would put me in favor of a cherry pick, but not volunteering to do that cherry pick.
Yeah, okay. That's good. I think that answers one. I can take notes after this. And then question 2, any reason why client goalie direction doesn't use watches?
I think I commented on this. I don't know for sure what the reason is, and I think I had said, well, probably the authors at the time just felt that was good enough. But I suggested you could always ask the SIG to see if anybody knew if there was any other reason. Which I think
It's
is why
very,
it's unnecessary.
very old code. I don't remember. I think it was based on an original implementation that went direct to SIG, and there was some hesitancy at the time. The restart behavior seems worth discussing because this is, I get the second time even in this call that it came up with the leader restarts too soon, and they don't have either a unique leader name or a graceful release that released it when they shut down, or a sleep time app or like a rest time afterward to be sure someone else had a chance to pick up that lease. And all of those things can mitigate that, but I guess it's not obvious that they can.
Okay. So looks like they've had his answers, and if this was not enough, he can come next meeting and continue the conversation. Very good. I think we covered large agenda today. Thank you, everybody, for the inputs and feedback and participation. I hope you close a good Wednesday, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. I will upload the recording later today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.